Welcome back to another episode of The Conscious Artist, a safe space for conversations around mental health awareness for musicians, artists, and all human beings. I am your host, Pallavi Mahidara. I'm a concert pianist and teacher, and I am absolutely thrilled that you are joining us today. My hope for this show is that it will give all of us a sense of solidarity and knowledge that we are not alone, and together, through these conversations, we can create more awareness and change for a healthier future. I am joined today by a powerhouse woman and a very dear friend. As a concert pianist, she has performed all over the world, championing the works of female composers. As an entrepreneur, she is co-founder of the Washington Arts Ensemble, a nonprofit dedicated to delivering an unforgettable chamber music experience. And as a mother, she is raising two beautiful boys. Please join me in welcoming my wonderful friend and colleague, Natalia Kazaryan. Natalia, welcome to The Conscious Artist.
Hi, Pallavi. Thank you so much for having me. What a thrill.
It is my pleasure. You and I have been friends for so many years now, and I am increasingly blown away by your resilience and strength each year. To start us off, would you mind sharing a little bit of your childhood background with our audience and how music came to be a part of your life?
Sure. I grew up in the Republic of Georgia in the early 90s, and this was around the time of the fall of the Soviet Union. There was the economic collapse of the change in regime. And I just remember feeling like there was a lot of uncertainty. My parents' generation, my grandparents' generation, growing up as kids, that was all we knew. But you could sense the unease, the general malaise of society. We definitely grew up learning to be resilient. And, things like scheduled electricity and scheduled running water, these were just realities of life for us. And that's all we knew. So when in, late 90s, all of a sudden there was electricity all day and we could have running water any time of the day, that seemed like such a luxury. And so I think that growing up in that kind of an environment, and let me also mention the fact that while this was the reality of everyday life, culture was very much vibrant in my city. I grew up in Tbilisi, the capital of Georgia. That was so vibrant. There were concerts all of the time. There were plays. Opera was booming. And I grew up in sort of backstage environments of all of these institutions. So that was very much alive and well. So you see that kind of juxtaposition of the literal dark and the light. And so that I think that added something to my generation of kids growing up in that part of the world and just kind of making us a little bit stronger, a little bit more resilient and tougher in the face of a challenge. And that definitely came in handy as I had to help my family with the immigration process in America, which is not a simple process. And certainly as a young artist, a young musician trying to build a career, definitely as a mother. So these are things that helped me to develop that muscle. Music was the thing that gave me a lot of confidence. It gave me a sense of purpose, and it was the thing that was mine. I could practice and I would get better, and it just made me feel good. And it was very much the focus of my early years, and that I have always been very, very serious about music. And that kind of took me on this journey out of Georgia and to the States. And that was sort of the reason that we came to the States, and it helped sort of set the stage for the rest of my life.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And, as I said in the beginning, I'm constantly blown away by your strength and resilience. And my admiration has only grown for you as the years have gone by, especially with your journey into motherhood. And, I cannot even begin to imagine what your childhood was like growing up with scheduled water, scheduled electricity, things that a lot of us take completely for granted. And I can only imagine that, as you say, that resilience and that grit has not only shaped who you are as a person, but is also shaping who you are as a mother. For me, you are an absolute boss woman, super mom, powerhouse. And I'm really curious to know, because you're not only a mother, you're not only a pianist, but you're a performing, traveling pianist, artist, and mother. And so I want to ask you, what have been some of the biggest challenges for you navigating these two very different and almost equally time-consuming paths?
Right, that's a really good question. It's something that I'm still figuring out as the kids get older. Their needs continue to evolve. When my first was born, throughout that first year, I really wanted to be at home. I really wanted Rafi to be at home with me, and I had concerts to prepare for, and I was still traveling, and that was extremely challenging, finding that balance. And I learned that just wasn't possible. That balance at home, with him at home and with me trying to practice at home, that just didn't work at all. And around when he was 8 months old, the pandemic hit, and that just threw everything out the window. Everything that we had built in terms of finding a good flow, having found a babysitter that could help out the hours that I had to teach at the university or carve out the hours to practice, all of that was just out the window. And we had to find a way to just sort of survive, all of us. And I know that many people went through the same thing. And it was certainly a very, very trying period for families, working parents with young children. So after a brief period of just trying to get through it all, we put Rafi in daycare. And that was really the best decision that we made, because that gave me hours just to sit quietly at my instrument and think about what I wanted to accomplish. And that made it possible for me to think about what I wanted, think about the kind of repertoire that I wanted to learn, what kind of an impact do I want to have as an artist. And you need time to think about these things. You need space to get stuck. You can't do these things with a toddler running around and wanting your attention. Obviously, that's kind of a reality of being a parent. But you just, as an artist, with somebody who has ambition outside of the home, this is just an incredibly difficult thing to figure out. So for me, what worked was putting Rafi in daycare. And so when Henry was born, my second, I put him in daycare very quickly. Rafi went in at 18 months and Henry went in at 4 months. So that was something that I learned. I was kind of unapologetic about needing my hours at my instrument. And so they're thriving. I'm just really, really happy with their development. And I know that is the right decision for us as a family. And then when it comes to traveling, the nature of our work is such that we perform at night. We perform on the weekends. And these are hours where there is no daycare. So what do you do if you have a partner who's also very, very focused on their career and is doing incredibly well? And with that comes a certain amount of travel and times that you have to focus on your work. So then you have to enlist more help, and that comes in the form of babysitters, that comes in the form of family flying in to help out when we're out of town, to provide a little bit of support. And so all of that is to say, I finally let myself accept help. I finally let myself realize that I can't do it all myself. And my husband and I cannot do it all ourselves either. We're both working and we both have ambitions and we both have passions. And that means if you're in a, lucky, privileged position where you can afford childcare, that's just the thing that makes all of the difference. And it really does take a village. So when people say, how do you do it? You're doing so many things and you're doing this and that and being a mother and a performing artist and building an organization. I could not have done this all myself. I did not do this all myself. It happened with the help of many people. It truly did take a village, and we're all figuring out how to continue to work together in a way that makes sense with the children's growing needs, with my needs as I continue to evolve in my work. So all of that is to say, it took a team to make this all work, and it continues to be the case.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to say I can barely do time management well on my own with no kids and living alone. So I was just consistently blown away with how you managed to find time to practice, especially I remember during the pandemic with all the online concerts you were giving. You were doing like a regular weekly series. And I was just consistently in awe.
Yeah, well, what people didn't realize was that my father was, walking Rafi in a stroller outside while I was doing that.
No, and I mean, as you say, it often does take a village. And for, those that are lucky enough to be able to have a support system and a support network around, I can understand how that definitely helps and benefits. And, a lot of the times we see our male counterparts, for our male colleagues, traveling musicians, we see them traveling and going off and coming home to the family. But we don't talk enough about how much more taxing and how much more difficult it is on so many levels, not only physically, but also mentally, for the mom to be traveling and for the mom to be away. For example, when each of your kids was smaller, and maybe still even now, if you were breastfeeding and you were traveling, what about that? Or trying to get a routine for the kids and trying to get them on a sleep schedule, and then you have to be away for 2.5 or 3 days. So if you don't mind sharing, I would love to know, what are some of the challenges that you faced in that realm regarding the actual traveling content and being away from your kids physically and also mentally? I know that concept of mom guilt is real, and my sister has talked about it too. And I'm just curious to know what your experience has been with that.
Right. Mom guilt is just, it's terrible. No matter what you do, you feel guilty. If you spend your whole life building your skills and pursuing your passion, and then you're in the next stage of your life, you have a child, and you're thinking about, oh my gosh, I'm not practicing enough. I'm not learning new things. I'm not doing enough of this or enough of that. That's guilt. And then when you do go, you take that trip and you're missing your babies. That's guilt too. So no matter what you do, I feel like there is guilt, and it's really important to recognize that. It's important to not fight that. So, okay, you're feeling guilty. What can you do? Recognizing your feelings and your emotions. How can you continue to do what you need to do while also honoring the place that you're in as a mother? To answer your question about what it was like traveling when the kids were really little, I did breastfeed for the first 6 months, and I did travel in that period. So that meant pumping. That meant bringing this pumping equipment, and, technology has come really far. With Rafi, I had this stationary pump that I could use at home mostly. But with Henry, I invested in this thing called the LV, which is a portable one. So I could pump while waiting to board my flight. I could pump while waiting, on the train. And that's just incredible, right? That's just, it's so convenient. And if you make that decision and that you're able to pump, that makes it possible. That makes all of the difference. So I would pump multiple times a day to continue to keep my supply up. And this is for those of you who don't really understand or know what it's like to be away from a nursing baby. It's a logistical nightmare, to be honest. You have to do this every few hours to make sure that your supply continues to be where it needs to be. So I would pump, I would store the milk in little baggies. I would put it on ice in a special little carry-on bag, and just kind of look for a fridge with a freezer wherever I went. And it's kind of funny. It's just it's a very peculiar period in your life when you're doing these things, and you do it if that's important to you, and if it makes sense for you and your family, you do it. And this period doesn't last forever, so you just kind of you're in that mindset where you have to do what you have to do, and then you get on stage and you do your work, and then you get back on the flight and you think about how much you missed your babies and your husband or your wife, and you just can't wait to be back home. And it's just all of those experiences come with, okay, I'm glad I did this. I can't wait to see my family. Or I'm glad that I made the decision to get on that flight and to pursue my dreams. And my babies will be there when I come back. So it's all about the mindset. I feel, and I learned that with my first, and it was there for me with my second. Things were definitely a little bit easier once Henry was in daycare.
Wow. I really love that. I mean, I love your mindset, and I have seen the difference with you between your firstborn and your second. And I have admired you for both kids, the way you were handling the situations with both. And something that has come up a lot in conversation with people that do have kids, where we talk about, particularly talking to artists, musicians and artists, where I'm speaking to them about insecurities or doubts and fears. A lot of them have said that there was a big mindset shift once they had kids. If they dealt with like stage fright or performance anxiety or just general insecurities in their day-to-day life, that it was very different, that mindset changed completely after kids because your whole perspective changed. And so I'm curious to know if you saw a change in your own mental health state before having kids versus after.
Right. Very, very good question. So I guess if I have to think about me as an artist before Rafi, I was trying all these new things. That was around the time when I started to really become passionate about championing works by women, and I was really deep in that stage. But that came with a lot of insecurity as well. That came with, oh, do people care? Because it wasn't so common for artists, for organizations to be programming those works yet. This was about 5 years ago. And I really felt like I was kind of uncharted territory. And that came with a lot of insecurity too. And I was much more conscious about taking risks. I worried about what people might think. Do people care? How does this look on the outside, right? And after I had Rafi, and even more so after I had Henry, I just kind of stopped caring. I stopped caring about what other people think. And I was much more focused on self-improvement, on learning new skills, on bettering myself as a person. And that definitely transitioned into, there was a connection between bettering myself as a person into bettering myself as a mother, because I was just a lot more open-minded. And maybe this is part of getting older too, that it just didn't really matter what other people thought of what I'm doing. And if they thought it was important, or who does she think she is, kind of thing. I just don't think about that at all anymore. It doesn't faze me. If it's meaningful to me, if it feels like it's going to help people, if it's going to make a difference in our sort of larger picture of what we're trying to achieve, which is connecting the art to people, bringing meaningful musical experiences to the audience, then that's what I'm focused on. So having kids paired with the fact that I just got older and was a lot more focused on meaningful work definitely shifted my mindset and helped me put those voices, other voices, that white noise of criticism or judgment far away.
I love that so much. And I think that's sort of the life goal, right? To be able to let go of those societal pressures and those, as you say, the white noise, the outside negative voices that are telling us, oh, well, what will people think? What if this? What if that?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like often it's a big life change that will direct people sort of one way or the other, whether it's getting married or having kids or getting a divorce or the death of a loved one. It's some sort of big life occurrence that changes our view of the world. And most of the time, hopefully for the better, even through the grief, even through the pain, even through the joy, whatever experience it is, it helps to filter out, as you said, the noise. And I think also COVID and the pandemic did that as well. I think it gave people a chance to really sit with themselves, probably for the first time in a long time, and say, hey, is this really important to me? Do I really care about this? Do I really care what people think? And I certainly have gone through that evolution myself, and learning to not care. I mean, it's not easy because I spent most of my life caring what other people thought, right? So learning to catch myself every time I start to wonder, what if they think this? Nope, I don't care what they think. Is this important to me?
Right, and it's important to note who those people are. Of course,
Right.
It's really important to have people that you will go to, because there should be people whose advice you really cherish and whose opinion you really care about, and hopefully you go to certain people for guidance. That's really, really important to have, and I've had that, and I continue to meet people who inspire me and who encourage me to think outside of the box. And I find it really important to have those kinds of voices in your life, but those are positive voices. You go to them to learn, you go to them to be better. And that's sort of the approach that they take. They are a positive influence in your life.
They're there to support you.
Exactly. They are there to help you and to listen as you try to figure out what matters.
Exactly, exactly. That is a very important clarification, and I will say it one more time that yes, there is a big difference between the positive voices that are maybe your parents or your family or your partner or your spouse or your best friend or your colleagues or your mentors or your teachers that are there to support you and to guide you and to give the advice that they feel is the best that they can offer based on what they see your potential is or where you want to go. And at some point as we get older, we also have to start trusting our intuition. I mean, we say it all the time, like trust your intuition, trust your gut. Yes, you do need to do that and do that with informed ideas, with the research that you've done, with the advice that you've gotten from other people. But at the end of the day, no one else is inside our heads. Like no one else could tell you, Natalia, you should be practicing this many hours a day while you're raising a 1-year-old, or you should only be traveling this many days out of a month or out of a year because you need to spend this much time with your kid. No, that is 100% your decision, and it will differ from child to child as well, because every human being is different. The way we are and the way we grow as time goes by shows us our own evolution and how we are adapting through the experiences that we have. So yeah, take out the negative noise. But keep the
The
positive
moral
for
of the
sure.
story, for sure. Keep the good.
Keep the good. So you started a concert series while taking care of a newborn and a 2-year-old. I need to ask you, for our listeners and for myself, even though I asked you about it then, I still don't know how you did it. How on earth did you manage to do everything?
Right. I feel like that period it was very complicated for me. I was postpartum, and that was a very, very difficult pregnancy for me. I went through completely debilitating morning sickness. I wasn't able to do anything for the first 4 months, and the timing was, it was still COVID times, and I was able to kind of spend it in bed for the most part. But with that came the sense that I was missing out, that I was not doing enough, that I was not learning. And this is, I think, just part of my nature. I get very anxious when I feel like I am not improving myself consistently. And that's a blessing and a curse, because often, no matter how much I achieve, I feel like I'm not doing enough. And if I did enough today, I feel like, well, okay, what's next? What is the next thing that I can achieve? So it's sort of this thing about making grades as opposed to figuring out what you really want to do, what is going to bring you sustained joy in life, and how can you turn your passion and your love, for what you're doing and this thing that you've spent your entire life building. How can you turn that into something that you can be happy with? I really want to meet people in our field who are truly, truly happy with where they are in their careers. I've yet to do that. No matter at what level you are, no matter how much you've achieved, you're always thinking about that next season. So
Right.
I was acutely aware of what the pandemic had done to the arts community in general, with venues shutting down, scaling back their seasons, being told, oh, we have to reschedule, into the next season, the season after, but we're just not sure. And just seeing this attitude of a lot of organizations of, no, we're still in the pandemic, and we can't bring back the audience. And many of them were right to do that because, obviously you need to respect the moment that you're in and do what's safe. We noticed that, we were losing momentum. We were losing the arts. And we also noticed that a lot of people were ready to be in the concert halls again, in a safe way, obviously. And so that gave us a little bit of a push to start the series. And by we, I mean my co-founder and I, Christopher Schmidt. We just took a huge risk because we thought if we don't do it now, we might not have a chance to do this at all. We might not have an audience to come back to. So in September of last year, 2021, we launched our chamber music series at the Arts Club of Washington. We had our inaugural concert in September, and we were just blown away. We sold out, and we've sold out nearly all of the concerts that we've had since then, which were monthly. And some months we had multiple concerts, including benefit concerts for Ukraine. And so we've just been blown away by the amount of support that we've received, and just people coming, people from all walks of life, every age, every profession. They were there because they were so ready to be reunited with culture, to be reunited with music, and to connect with each other. And that's one of the things that's special about our organization, is that people get a chance to talk to each other, to talk to artists. You have that first hour is socializing hour, and it's not this fancy thing. It's just giving people an opportunity to talk to each other. So that really set us up for success, I think. That moment of just connecting people, connecting the audience with one another.
I have to say, I remember the day you told me that you were going to launch this concert series, and I was just, my jaw was on the floor. You were at my house, and I was like, this girl, just like, she can do everything. And I have to say, it was because I remember you said something to me that day. You said that you wanted to feel like you were in control of your career. And I have not forgotten those words. It was a big factor into me finding the courage to actually go forward with this podcast, because somebody suggested to me last year in, I think, September or October, why don't you do a podcast? Because I've been talking about mental health for quite a few years with my students, and in a young artist program that I help run at the Reina Sofia School here in Madrid. And these topics of, talking about mental health, about expressing what it's been like to deal with performance anxiety or stage fright, or, how do we prepare for these competitions? How do we deal with those negative voices in our heads? All of those things, these are things that I've been talking about and working with my students for years. And then somebody said, why don't you do a podcast? And I remember when I actually started to plan how this podcast would go, I think I had written like 35 episodes in 2 weeks. And I just kept having your voice in the back of my head. I'm not lying. I'm serious. Like, I kept having your voice in the back of my head saying you wanted to feel like you had control of your career. And I was like, this is the first time in my life that I am doing something that is away from the piano, that still has relevance to my life. It's not like a random hobby, but it is a branch. It is another facet of my purpose in life, of what I love to do. But it's not the only thing that I can do. Like, it's sitting at the piano and performing is not the only thing I can do. And I will be forever grateful to you, seeing you go forward with this incredible idea that you had, and actually making it a reality in such a short amount of time, and while having like 2 little kids, like one of them a newborn. Yeah, it was amazing.
That's really sweet. I'm so proud of what you achieved with the podcast. And I have to say, it's part of you. I mean, the theme here is that you took what you love to do, what you're passionate about, and thought from an angle of how can I help people? And you have an important voice now. You're bringing these conversations out, and we're thinking about these questions now, and we're talking in a way that we never felt comfortable doing. And I'm so grateful to you for this podcast and for doing that work in our society, and for artists to feel like they can finally open up and be honest with themselves, and to connect with our fellow musicians, but also with just generally with the public, and to share what it's like, and the struggles that we go through, not only as artists but as humans. And these are incredibly important conversations, and so you're doing just very meaningful work, and I'm so proud of you.
Thank you. I'm proud of us. I did want to ask you one last thing about postpartum depression. You mentioned it earlier that it was something that you did struggle with. And, not just in the music and artistic world, but I think in the world in general, we don't talk enough about postpartum depression. We don't talk enough about how common it is. And if you're okay with sharing your journey through that and how you found your way out of it, I think many of our listeners would be very grateful.
Postpartum depression is so hard to identify. I feel like often women don't realize they had it until until much, much later. So looking back, I probably didn't even know that I was depressed. And I must have been at different points in my pregnancy too, because physically I felt so ill. And I think one of the things that makes it so bad is if there are underlying issues that you're struggling with, if you remove the whole pregnancy and having a baby element from the equation altogether, and you have things that you're anxious about, and I think as artists, that's all of us. I think that can really trigger negative thoughts, that can really trigger just kind of the feeling very blue after having a kid. There's just such hormonal imbalance that happens for months until your body kind of gets back to its normal self, and it often takes a year, maybe 2 years, for you to really feel like yourself again physically.
Wow.
And maybe even more mentally. And I'm very lucky because I had help, I had support. My husband has been an incredible rock. You asked me how I've done the things that I've done. It's with the support of Martin, and it's because we're a team. But going back to feeling ill after having a kid, or just not feeling like yourself, because I think postpartum depression can take different forms. It's a very general term. Finding something that gave my career, gave my work refreshed purpose, which was this organization, that really helped me. Focusing on something that I could improve on, something that I could build. And I just remember the first night when I just decided that it was happening, and I was typing up a proposal to myself, if you will, like, what is this going to be? What do I want it to be? And there's a photo that Martin took of me. I was typing with about one hand and nursing the baby.
Oh my goodness.
Middle of the night. So just finding something that takes you out of the fog. Because if you continue to stay in the fog without, throwing yourself a rope, I think it's a downward spiral. So if you see a friend who's struggling, reach out, help them find something that can take them out of that funk, because that funk can turn into actual full-blown depression that can last for a very, very long time, that affects not only the mom, but the whole family.
Yes. Earlier in this season, I interviewed a professor of psychiatry on the topic of depression in general, and sort of the different types of depression and how we can recognize it. And I think you bring up a very good point. Very often, what can happen is that we're not always very good at looking at ourselves in the mirror, metaphorically. And so we may not be able to even realize, as you said, that we are feeling depressed. And I think there's a big difference between trying to avoid what you're feeling by throwing yourself into work and ignoring the symptoms, ignoring the feelings that you're having, versus what you did, which was to find something that gave you purpose, find something that could be a guiding force for you in order to help pull you out of that. Am I correct in saying that?
Absolutely. But the really important thing to recognize here is that I took myself out of the equation. I had to think of this as something that it was something that I was doing for my community, bringing music back into the community. It was not a vanity project, which is why it's easier to pursue it. Right. When I'm promoting the work, I'm not promoting myself, I'm promoting our mission. And it's easier to do that because you don't feel icky about it.
Oh my goodness, I understand.
Right. So when I'm building, the website and setting up ticketing and I'm learning to code for that, I'm excited to do that. These are fun, cool, new skills that I'm learning for the mission. And it's not me. It's what am I doing for my community? How can I make life better? How can I make things better for other people? How can I help them enjoy life a little bit more? So that was my mentality, because it takes so much work to start a nonprofit. You have to think of it as something greater than you.
Absolutely. I think I completely understand how you felt and how you feel about it, because I think it's exactly the same for me with the podcast. Absolutely. I don't have any weird feeling or that icky feeling of promoting the podcast or, putting out new content every week. I'm just like, okay, this is a project and I am promoting this project. And it's funny. I mean, this will have to be for a different episode, but it's very funny to note the difference within myself about how I feel promoting the podcast versus how I feel promoting myself. So, but that will have to be for another episode.
Artist building enterprise.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much. I so appreciate you sharing your honesty and your vulnerability with us on some really challenging topics that, as you say, affect not only mothers, but also entire families, because it's not just you once you're a mother, it's you and your kids and your family and everyone involved. And as I said in the beginning, I'm just blown away by your strength and your resilience and your perseverance always. So thank you for being such a great role model.
Thank you for facilitating these conversations. And like I said, it's just an opportunity for me to share with you the fact that I didn't do it all myself. It took so many people supporting me and helping me and guiding me in order to build what I'm building. No one can do it all themselves.
Thank you all so much for listening. I am truly grateful for the support from each and every one of you. If you would like to submit any questions or topics for us to address on the show, you can send us a message on our Instagram page @ConsciousArtistPodcast. Help us to spread more awareness by sharing this episode with your friends, your colleagues, your teachers, and your students. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Sending you all so much love and strength to tackle this week, and we'll see you next Monday for another episode of The Conscious Artist.